Hello, happy Sunday, everybody. Today is February 25th. Today's podcast number 38, day 38. I'm on a roll, people. I haven't skipped a day, not yet. And I'm aiming towards 300, 300th podcast, and I planned it out. So you're going to see my face for the next 262 or 60-ish days. Now, what we're talking about today, we're talking about imposter syndrome. And the reason why we're talking about imposter syndrome, and the reason is because someone messaged me and they said, can you please talk about imposter syndrome? Just like that. And with that cue, I said, sure, why not? Let's do it. I love a perfect challenge, something that I'm not very familiar with, but something that a lot of people experience. And no doubt I've experienced some of it myself in terms of this podcast. And when I first started, I said to myself, well, why would anyone listen to me? Why would anyone take me seriously? And worst of all, would people actually call me a fraud? To be honest with you, that didn't really cross my mind in terms of people calling me a fraud. But I always thought to myself, okay, like who's going to listen to me and why would I be the voice that they want to listen to? But then I really thought about it. And this is actually one of the steps that I'm going to be talking about at the end of the podcast in terms of what to do when you do recognize the signs of imposter syndrome. Is that I said to myself, well, I mean, it's not really true. I'm a dentist and I give a lot of trainings to my team and other people as well. And I give advice. People listen to me and people tell me how valuable my advice is. So, I mean, people do benefit to some degree from things that I have to say. And so why not do a podcast, right? It seems like everyone's doing it, but not in reality. No one's really, not everyone's doing it, but some people are. But I've seen other people's podcasts and they haven't done the lives daily like I'm doing. So you could say that's my unique selling proposition, even though I'm not selling anything. I digress. So have you ever experienced moments where you thought to yourself, who's going to listen to me? I'm a fraud, or I could be a fraud, or ever felt inadequate and not wanting to pursue a vocation or career choice because you didn't think that you'd be good enough for it, or ever thought that you wanted to do some kind of public speaking, such as maybe doing a podcast, and thought to yourself, well, who the heck would listen to me? What do I have to say that other people haven't heard of? Or even worse yet, and this is something that most of us think of, is what do I have to say that most people already don't know? When in reality, most people don't know much. So these are self-defeating questions, and I've got some tricks for you to deal with. Not to deal with, rather. I've got some tricks for you to use so that you can deal with this problem. That's what I meant to say. All right, moving on. So this here is the slide, imposter syndrome. Now, the definition of imposter syndrome is very simple. It's exactly what I alluded to. You don't believe that you have what it takes in terms of skills, and you're afraid of being exposed as a fraud. And when you do succeed, you attribute it to luck rather than effort. Now, unfortunately, people who do experience imposter syndrome, they are more prone to be depressed because they suffer from something called low self-esteem and self-doubt. And people that do have low self-esteem and low self-confidence and self-doubt, they do experience depression because they really get that down into that rabbit hole, and then they start feeling very bad about themselves and about their life and how they're not worthy of anything. And so then it just starts to spiral downwards. Well, you have to kind of just snap out of it and realize that you're leading yourself down the rabbit hole and jump out so that you can continue on your life, because nobody is certain of anything. No one can speak the 100% truth because we're all human. And by extension of us being human, we're all prone to errors. And so go ahead and make mistakes, man. Go ahead and make mistakes. Stop being afraid of making mistakes. It's kind of silly if you think so. And one thing that researchers have seen, by the way, with regards to women versus men, is that women tend to experience this imposter syndrome a lot more than men. And that kind of makes sense because women are very self-critical. Men that just kind of do things, a lot of times we don't really think about the things that we're doing. I mean, not to say we're a bunch of cavemen and just going around smashing each other. But what I'm trying to say is that men don't overthink things as much as women do. And so it makes sense that because women overthink things and they're very self-critical, they tend to be more in that group of people that experience imposter syndrome as opposed to men. I mean, it's kind of, but it's it makes sense, but evidence has supported it as well. Now, what are the signs of imposter syndrome? This is something that's very interesting. These are the signs of imposter syndrome, and of course, I have my 2 cents with regards to these signs because I don't think they're really signs of imposter syndrome, but here they are. Afraid of being ousted as fraud, feeling unworthy of success. I mean, come on. Who feels worthy of success? Don't you just try your best and you try to attain the goal? And then when you do attain it, then you're like, all right, cool, I did it. Dismissing positive feedback. I mean, I guess that could happen. Distrusting of others. A lot of people have trust issues, not because they have symptoms of imposter syndrome, but because they've had bad experiences with other people. Blaming accomplishments on luck. I mean, if you're blaming accomplishments on luck and you have really put in the effort, then maybe you're deluding yourself and you're not looking at the reality. And over preparing. Come on, really? Over preparing? Everybody over prepares. And you have to over prepare in order for you not to seem incompetent and for you not to feel incompetent. I mean, that is the secret sauce of success is over preparation. The more you prepare, the better that you are, the better the outcome, the better that you're going to look in front of your peers, the better you're going to perform, the better the results. So, I mean, these things that you find on the internet in terms of what are the signs of imposter syndrome, what is imposter syndrome, man, here's the thing that I want to say. When you give anything a label, you give it power. So if you're trucking along and you're doing your absolute god darn best, and then, I don't know, you fail, but then you don't say to yourself, I'm a failure, or you don't say to yourself, I suck, or you don't actually label yourself. You're kind of like, oh, that didn't work out. Let me try this. Oh, that didn't work out. Let me try this. If you don't give it a label, then that gives you the energy to keep going. If you give it a label, you give that thing power. And once you give that thing power, then you kind of succumb to that power. You kind of fall prey to that power. So the best thing for you to do, as soon as you make a mistake, kind of just brush it off and just keep going. And yes, over preparation is incredibly important. And the reason I heard this imposter syndrome thing from a few people, and one of which was from a good friend of mine who just started in real estate not too long ago. I think it was like a year and a half ago, 2 years now. And I told him, we were talking, we were having a coffee, we were talking, chit-chatting, and I said, why don't you do a podcast? And this is before I started doing this podcast this year. And he said, yeah, you should. And then he mentioned imposter syndrome. And I was like, that's the thing, is that you think that as soon as you talk, that people are going to see you as a fraud because you're new to your field. Because you think that other people look at you as someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about. And then I told him, I said, don't you know that the only people that are going to think that way are two kinds of people. One, people that are lower in skill than you and they're jealous of you and they know that they don't have the ability and guts to actually do podcasts like you. Or two, they are your colleagues and they know that they don't have what it takes for them to do podcasts. And so they're going to criticize you. And then they're going to say, who's he to do this and whatever. You'll never get criticized from above. You'll always get criticized from below. So keep that in mind. And so I encouraged him. Unfortunately, he still hasn't done his podcast. And so if you're watching this and you know who you are, I'm not going to expose you, but you should definitely do your podcast because it's incredibly beneficial. It increases your trust or people's trust in you and allows them to interact with you before they even meet you. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to doing the podcast, and actually allows you to sharpen the saw of your knowledge so that you're more familiar with things when you do meet your clients and you're more confident in your ability to speak and to present yourself. There's a lot of benefits to podcasting. I'm not saying it's easy, but here's examples of people, titans, people that are at the epitome of their league when it came to anything that they've done. But initially, they started off not being good at all. Okay, so here's an example, prime example, Tony Robbins. Most of you who are watching this more than likely have heard of Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins, believe it or not, started off in infomercials, which he paid for himself. And these infomercials, by the way, aired during the time that everyone was sleeping. They aired at night. like during the very late hours of the night. Like I'm talking like 10, 11, 12. But he kept doing it. And do you know how many people criticized him in the beginning? I cannot tell you how many people actually criticized him at the beginning. I mean, an insane amount of people. And look at him now. People see him as the expert, the guru when it comes to strategies. And people call him motivational speaker. People call him financial guru. He's written books and he has 0 university degrees, people. He's got 0 university degrees. He's just got gumption, effort, and a passion for him to carry through and help people. Another person, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, when he left wrestling and he came on the scene in order for him to get on and become an actor. And do you know how many people made fun of him? And people are like, oh, he thinks he can act. He can't act. I'd never watch a movie. My friends who are now staunch Rock fans, they told me straight up to my face as we were discussing, they said, I'd never watch a single movie from this guy. He doesn't know how to act. Okay, now look, he has what they say the Midas touch, which is as soon as he touches anything, whether it's a movie or a product, it turns into gold. But he started off as a nobody, even though he had a good run at wrestling and acting. He went right back to the start. Okay, so if you're suffering from imposter syndrome, just remember, snap out of it, and just remember that no one starts off good, no one starts off incredible. You have Oprah Winfrey, Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld, if you look at his story, he wrote every single day and he kept a calendar. And now they term it the Seinfeld method, where you'd have a calendar and then on the calendar, you'd write off every single day that you've done a practice of your craft every single day. So then he would write a joke every single day, right? And he would continue that throughout the entire year. And obviously, he's known to be one of the geniuses in comedy. And you have Tupac. I don't know if any of you know Tupac. I think some of you may know Tupac. He started off when he first started off, he wasn't that good. And then he adapted and he studied other methods. And he said himself, he started mastering other people's methods. And then he got so good, he started beating their methods, right? But it took time. It started off not so great. His earlier stuff wasn't that great. And then it became incredible. It became really good. And I mean, there's a lot of different examples that I can mention, but really, what's the point? So here are the 3 steps for you to get rid of or to deal with imposter syndrome when you do face it, which are: know that it's happening, own your success, be confident in yourself and actually be proud of your success, and then challenge your thinking. Like I said to you, you have to understand that everyone passed through these stages. You were not born to walking, right? You were born and then you started to crawl and then you got up and you started to walk, then you fell, then you got up again, then you fell, then you got up again, and you did it over and over again. Same thing when you came to riding your bicycle or when you did some ice skating, if you ice skate or any kind of sport. You sucked at it at first and people looked at you and they laughed at you, but you kept going and then you got good at it and now you're great. So if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, just understand the process and how the process works, and that everything takes time, and that the more time you put into it, the faster that smaller the gap between you being incompetent and you being competent happens, right? You decrease the gap, the more practice, the more you put forth. Why do you think I'm doing lives every single day, right? I mean, come on. All right. So lastly, I'm going to end it with this. Today's very short. Obviously, it's Sunday, and I'm sure all of you want to head to work. For those of you that not head to work, rather head to bed so you can prepare for work. For those of you that are watching this. And so I want to say to you, as the last thing is that it's very common. It is incredibly common, very, very common for people to experience these kind of signs of imposter syndrome. And if you're experiencing it, just understand that nobody cares. Okay, you're putting way too much emphasis on other people's opinion because you give too much emphasis on your opinion of others, and you think other people have the same opinion of you, and they don't. Okay, most people are too worried about themselves. They're so self-consumed. They don't really care about what you do. Okay, so just keep doing what you're doing, and then you'll reach a certain stage where people will start caring because you're drawing attention to yourself, and everyone goes on to their own merry ways. And as they say, Bob's your uncle. That's it for today. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. Hope your Sunday was incredibly great. And I will see you tomorrow, hopefully at 8 p.m. So I'm starting this, okay? I'm going to do my jolly best for me to do these podcasts at 8 p.m. From Sunday. See, I did this today at 8 p.m. from Sunday to Thursday. And then Friday and Saturday, it's going to be variable. But from Sunday to Thursday, I'm going to aim to do my podcast at 8 p.m. So I'm going to start announcing it as an 8 p.m. podcast live show. So tune in, because then you'll know exactly what time it is and there's going to be no guessing. And if you find this stuff beneficial, tell your friends. Keep well and always keep smiling.